This next one's going to be interesting because I think, and I'd love to hear what you've heard, but and this next question is how to know what's too low in regards to calories when you go into a deficit. And I remember for a long time hearing the numbers 1200 and 1500. And it was always like males, if you go below 1500, you are like, that's not good. Like that's where you start crash dieting, and 1200 for women is like, that's the point where you start crash dieting. And if you talk to any physique athlete who is extremely good at getting extremely lean as possible, they've probably dipped below those regardless, almost anybody. So, is there a number that is too low when you're going to deficit?
Um, so not really, which is kind of scary to say. But I say that with the caveat that you don't want to be at extreme deficits for very long, right? There's a lot of research in the 80s and 90s on very low calorie diets where they would give 600 calories for like 8 weeks to obese people. And man, they would lose weight. Their like eventually their appetite would go away. Like it worked really well. But obviously that's not sustainable. These are really obese people. Um, they've also done low calorie diets, which are 1,200 calories for women and 1,500 calories for men, I think. So that's kind of where those two numbers come from, I think. And again, they work, you lose weight. They're not super sustainable. Adherence is hard, but like if you look at the these people's hormones, their blood, their everything, like they're perfectly healthy. So I think for people to know when their calories are too low, you have to look past like a number. You have to look into, how are you feeling? Is it actually causing some like mental issues, whether that's eating disorder or like anxiety or depression or things like that? If you're a female, have you lost your menstrual cycle because you've been eating so low for so long? Are your workouts just like terrible and you feel like just laying around all day? Um, so I think you go on kind of other things and try to figure out where you fall within that bracket of, probably don't want to go under 1,200 calories for more than like 8 to 9 weeks, but you shouldn't need to either.
So, and this is something I've used in the past when trying to explain this kind of thing to people, and it actually ties in really well with what you said at the beginning. I always say there's like three dials of creating a deficit, and that's frequency, duration, or intensity. You can make a really small, mild deficit and stay there for a long time. You'll be fine, and you'll slowly get results. You can instead crank up the intensity and get a little more aggressive, not stay there as long, but you can get after it. And then the frequency, it's like kind of like a Matador study or something similar. Where it's like you have periods of dieting, whether that's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or it's like you have a couple months on, month or two off, and you have the frequency is higher than the other two. Just like training intensity and volume, you can't have both dials cranked up because you're just going to crush yourself. You can have one cranked up, the other one cranked down a little bit.
Yeah.
And this kind of ties in perfectly with the way you open that up. Is like you have to kind of choose a dial.
Yeah. And so I think people always ask, and I'm sure you get this too, is like what deficit should I start with? Right? Like how many calories or what percentage, right? And so this is where you kind of can guide people a little bit, right? If they're eating like, you look at the macros, you kind of get their data and you're like, all right, you're eating, I don't know, 2,500 calories if you're a guy, like a bigger. We'll start you with 2,000 calories. It's like a 25% deficit, right? Or 20% is a really safe number to where like you want to kind of see results fairly quickly, but you want something that's sustainable. Um, you could try that. So I like the dial. I don't think anyone's ever explained it to me that way, but that's very true because you could do a very steep deficit for like 2 weeks, but you know, who knows how long you'll be able to keep that up.
Yeah, and I think you got to weigh out the cons or the negative biofeedback, because you're going to get it no matter what. If you diet slowly for a really long time, at some point in time, you're going to feel it. If you diet really hard, aggressive, you're going to feel it sooner. But, and that's kind of where you have to weigh out those versus your goals and how important your goals are, right? Because even for me, like I would love to be leaner, but the frequency dial is more of mine because like I'll go after it for a while. Once I start slowing down at work and I'm not enjoying my training, I bring the dial back up, and it's because I'm healthy and I'm at a healthy body fat, so I don't need to get shredded, even though I'd want to be. I would rather take small deficits and more diet breaks and take a year to get to a goal than to get after it for 12 weeks and get shredded, which I could do, but I just feel like shit, and I don't want the business to take a hit because of that, or my family, or anything like that. Um, but if I was competing, that's just part of when you go into it. If you're accomplishing a photo shoot or competing, you just go into it going, I'm going to feel like shit. And that's part of the symptoms of getting shredded. And that's just part of it. You just have to accept that. Now we obviously know, just with, especially with all the metabolic adaptation research that has come out over the years, of like, there's a decline in thyroid and testosterone, an increase of cortisol, and all these different things when we're dieting. But I don't think, and I'm sure you found this digging into this question for the research, I don't think there's a point where that increases from a caloric number perspective. Now, we could say when you're in X percentage of a deficit, 20, 30, whatever, you probably experience more of those. And if you're there for 3 weeks, you start to get those symptoms. But when people say what's too low, it's hard to say 1200, 1500, because are you a 110-pound female or a 160-pound female? It's completely different. I don't think there's a black and white number. Um, and for a percentage, I'd like to hear your thoughts, but I usually tell people at least 10 up to 25% when you start, and then usually your adjustment
Mhm.
are less than 10% along the way when you're creating a bigger deficit.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great advice. I think on your comment with the hormonal panels and cortisol and things like that, really those start to become a problem when you get lean, right? Because if you're healthy or if you're a little overweight and you just want to lose like 10 pounds, right? Those things aren't going to have an effect. Like you're not losing enough weight. Whereas if you look at the physique literature, like those people in the case studies, like yeah, their testosterone and like thyroid hormones drop to the floor, and they come right back when they're done. But like things do change very quickly, especially when you start to get lean.
Yeah. I think, and obviously we'll save too much of the hormone talk for the next one, but I get this question all the time too of like, hey, I have a new client. She has 40 pounds to lose. She's barely eating. We got to reverse diet her. And I'm always like, you don't. She has 40 pounds to lose. You do not need to reverse diet her. She's probably not actually even in that deficit. You just need to figure out adherence so you can find out actually how much she's consuming. And this is where I'm like, correct me if I'm wrong, but somebody who is obese or overweight could potentially have some of the same hormonal issues as somebody who is underweight because their health is compromised. It's on a completely opposite end of the spectrum. Somebody has too much body fat versus somebody doesn't have enough body fat, but both of them can have similar hormone issues because of different things. So for that person over there, don't reverse diet them. Get them to lose weight so they can fix their hormone issues. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, especially for some of the health outcomes like HDL, LDL, more like the things that your physician cares about, cardiovascular health.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, your insulin, your glucose, like those things are out of whack. The heavier you get, like the heavier. So when you bring back in like its normal range, you're like, okay, this is good. I can stay in here. And then when you go on the other end, it's like things start to get a little weird again. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Cool. Okay. So do you have a conclusion on how low you can bring your calories, just so people leave with a
Yeah,
answer?
yeah. So if you're going to use low calories, and we're talking 12 or 1500 calories um, for women and men respectively, uh, don't expect to be able to do it very long. It's better to be able to adhere to your diet and use not quite as low calories than go super low. But also don't be afraid to go low because it's going to be okay. You just may not be able to do it.
Yeah. Comes down to personality type and lifestyle. If you can muster it up.
Yeah.
Cool.